Hello lovelies! Welcome back for this year's Mermay Collaboration. Taking part, we have Electric Bunny, one of a kind. I Can Do That DIY. His name is Akin. Blurred Colors Art. Fairyman Dolls. Steppu Doll. Lady Dynamite Creates. And Dolly Pop. It's been a while since I did a new video, and I wanted to do something really cute and fun. So I decided to make a clown for my mermaid this year. I dug through my stock box and I found these adorable Hairdorables dolls. This line is a little older and I'm not sure if they're in production anymore, but their face sculpts are super cute. I think the one with the curly rainbow hair will be perfect for my clown, and her open smile is just what I need. Before starting the repaint, I need to prep the doll. I boil some water in my trusty tea kettle, pour it in an old jelly jar, and submerge the doll. This softens the vinyl for the head so that I can more easily remove it without damaging the neck peg. The neck pegs for these dolls are an interesting design, and it actually took more force than I was expecting to remove the head, even after heating it. Next, I remove the head from the LOL OMG body that I'll be using. For this doll, I will be making a hybrid. Before I can put the Hairdorables head on the OMG's body, I need to make some modifications to the neck hole. It's a little too small, so I'll be taking my craft knife and shaving away pieces of the vinyl a little bit at a time. I test the head every now and then on the OMG body to see if the fit is getting close to what I need. If I shave off too much at once, then the head could be floppy or be too loose. Once I'm satisfied, I carefully heat the head back up with my hairdryer while protecting the hair with a cloth. Now to remove the factory face paint. I take my 100% industrial acetone, pour it into an old garlic jar, and then use a cotton pad to remove her face paint. This face sculpt doesn't have very defined features, especially for the eyes, so while I don't have as many guides to work with while drawing the face, I will have more creative freedom with her eye designs. Off camera, I spray the doll with Mr Super Clear UV Flat Cut. To begin the face up, I slather her face with white pan pastels. I really want this face to be soft and cute, so I don't want to lay down a flat white acrylic paint layer for the white base. Using pastels will allow me to have soft edges, but each time I spray the face, it will significantly darken the white, so every time I do a layer, I'll need to add more white. A lot of light pastels have a kind of dampening effect, kind of like turning Multiply on in Photoshop with lighter colors. It really gets diminished every time you spray Mr Super Clear. In order to save on sealant, I will be working on other parts of her face at the same time as building up the white pastels. Using a red watercolor pencil, I am blocking out her red button nose and shaping her smile. Since this sculpt has an open smile, I actually want to try drawing in some teeth this time. To sketch her eyes, I'm using a medium tone yellow pencil. I'm using this lighter color so that if I make a big mistake, I can mostly just ignore it without having to go back in and erase it and risk taking up the white pastel. After I'm happy with the sketch, I go back in with a blue pencil and start darkening the lines. Then I draw in 2 little circles to block in the position of the eyebrows. I will be shaping these as I continue the face up. Once I'm happy with my sketch layer, I give the doll another spray of sealant to lock in my work. You can immediately see how the white pastel has been significantly diminished. So I go right back in with more white pastels. I'm not being particularly careful about working around my sketch. I'm just going to go ahead and cover everything up because, again, whenever I spray everything, that white will become more transparent and you'll be able to see the darker colors underneath. This also helps give everything a kind of softness that I want and to give me a little bit more opportunity to really sharpen the edges and refine things. So this time when I go back in with my darker pencils, I am trying to be a little bit more confident with my strokes and more neat. I'm adding more detail to her eyes as I work. I've turned the little round catch lights into little stars. Honestly, with this face up and really this entire doll, I was just making everything up as I went along. I add a little spike design coming down from her left eye and down onto her cheek, and on her right cheek I draw a little yellow star. I sketch these designs with a cream-colored watercolor pencil, again so that if I make a mistake, it's a lot easier to cover up. I also add a heart into her eyeshadow of her right eye. Then I add in some turquoise to the edges of her eyeshadow. Using a soft brush, I blend out some bright neon green, lime yellow pastels. I really want to keep all of the colors bright and saturated, so she's nice, light, and colorful. At this point, I decided to really lean into making her eyes blue. My original idea was to give her black eyes to contrast with all of the bright makeup. But after I added the star highlights in her eyes, I liked the idea of her eyes being like a starry sky. Then I go in with various watercolor pencils and create a rainbow gradient in the heart above her eye. I continue to work on defining the rest of her face paint, adding shadows with cool tones and highlights with warmer tones. Then I go in with a mint-colored watercolor pencil and highlight the irises. Now I'm on to the third and final layer of the face-up. For this layer, I'm mostly focusing on adding more pigment to areas that need it to really bump up the opacity and to also soften the edges of things with more pastels. I'm going in with some red pan pastel and blending it into that bright lime neon green yellow pastel from earlier. I add an additional highlight to her iris with a light blue. It feels a little late into the face-up, but I'm finally bringing black in and defining her eyeline and her lashes more. Then I draw in the waterline and a little dot for her tear duct with a pink pencil. I don't know if it shows up very well in the final product, but I go in with pink and darker reds to try to give her nose and lips a little bit more definition and shading. And of course, I had to add freckles because they are adorable. I go in with my cream pencil and add highlights underneath of the edges of her eyebrows, the tip of her nose, her lips, and underneath of her eyes. This time, when I add my final layer of white pastel, I will not be covering her entire face. I'll just be hitting the areas of her face where light would be hitting the most. So any raised surface like the bridge of her nose, her cheeks, the edges of her brows, and her chin. As a final step, I go in with a navy blue watercolor pencil and add some lighter, fluffy eyelashes. And with a final spray of Mr. Super Clear, her face-up is done. Now it's time to bring her out of her head burrito. I don't really have very many existing clothing patterns for LOL OMG dolls, so I'm going to take a swimsuit that I found from my stock box and try to create a pattern of my own. I lay the swimsuit as flat as I can and trace around the edges of the front. Then I go back in and I add about 4 millimeters of seam allowance so that it's the right size whenever I sew it. Then I do the same for the back of the swimsuit. This time I bring the crotch bit down a little bit and I add a tab for a closure. Sadly, my local Joann's is going out of business. It's gonna make finding some fabrics difficult in the future, but in the meantime I was able to find a bunch of quilting squares and fat quarters in bright, small patterns that I'll be able to use in doll customizing. I settled on this piece of fabric that has a white base with watercolor spots on it. I thought it would look good with the colors that I put in her face and the existing colors of her hair. I trace my pattern pieces onto the wrong side of my fabric. I just use a regular number 2 pencil since you won't be seeing this anyway. This gets sewn a lot like a regular bodice or t-shirt would, starting with attaching the back pieces to the front piece at the shoulders. Since this piece has no sleeves, the next step is to hem the armholes. I snip the edges so that I can fold them over more easily without tension. I'm also using my flat iron as I sew, pressing all of the hems and seams down as I work. And then I sewed the rest of the swimsuit off camera. I did it all by hand, and I'm honestly really bad at hand sewing. It was so frustrating trying to film it. Then I just said F it and let's just get this done. I'm pretty satisfied with the way it turned out overall. One modification that I made was to add darts to the front of the swimsuit so that it was a little bit more form-fitting since I'm not using a stretchy fabric. For the closure, I just used some peel and stick Velcro. Then I took a whole day's break. After I came back fresh, I picked this rainbow hexagonal fabric that I thought went perfect. And I actually do have a pattern on hand for her tail. I'll be using the same pattern from raddollsclothes.com that I used in my Rainbow High aerial repaint. Now this pattern is made for Rainbow High dolls and not LOL OMG dolls, but they have very similar proportions, so I decided that I was just going to cross my fingers and hope that it fits. Because I'm not using stretch fabric, I was hoping that it would be a little bit more snug. When I was sewing the swimsuit, it was fraying pretty badly, so I made sure to remember to use my pinking shears this time when I cut the tail pieces out. For the fin pieces, since I don't really want to hem them or sew multiple sides and then flip them out, I'm just using this really bright, oversaturated pink spandex. This was actually kind of a nightmare to try to cut the pieces out of. It kept slipping and sliding in my hands and making the pieces cut incorrectly. So I started pinning it as I worked. Even with that, I had to go back in after I finished cutting the pieces out and clean off the rough and jagged edges carefully with my very small and sharp scissors. After successfully struggling to cut the pieces out, I end up with 2 hip fin pieces and a finished tail fin. Thankfully, the majority of the tail is very simple to sew, and I was able to do it on my machine. However, the tail fin has to be sandwiched kind of oddly between the front and the back pieces. You have to pin it inside and tie it up out of the way so that you don't sew it into the side seams of the tail. Thankfully, the instructions are pretty clear and there are pictures to help you understand how to do this. I still kind of felt like I was sewing this a little blind, and I did actually end up going off the edge a little bit, leaving a gap in my seam. I do go back in and quickly fix this, however. But look at that! It fits! I didn't have to make any modifications to the pattern whatsoever. To continue the tail, I pin the hip fins to the top of the tail. Then I pin the waistband upside down around the edges, kind of like how you would a cuff, so that it can be flipped upward and then hemmed at the top. Here's how the tail turned out. I'm pretty happy with it. One small modification that I made was to do a little gathering stitch in the middle front to kind of create that V shape that you see. I stole this blouse with flared sleeves from one of my Rainbow High dolls. I think it was the Vampire Girl from their Halloween line. I also stole this ruffled collar from the same doll. I cut off the little black ribbon bow and turn it upside down. It completes her look pretty well, I think. For the most part, I wanted to keep the factory style of the doll's hair the same. I just want to go in and add a few decorations, so I will be sewing in these large pom-poms straight into the doll's hair. I try to use a thread that is a similar color to the doll's hair, but different enough that I could pick it out in the future if I ever wanted to cut the pom-poms back out. Then I managed to find 4 pom-poms that had the same color of her hair, and I arranged them down the front of her shirt in the same pattern as her original hair rooting. And with that, she's done. Stick around after the photos to see everyone's revealed mermaid dolls. There are so many talented artists in this collaboration, and they all did such a wonderful job. Everyone was so kind and patient and pleasant to work with in this collaboration. Please make sure you check out their dolls. Their links to their channels and videos are listed in the description box below. And thank you so much for watching my video. I will see you next time. Bye.